This is a quote from a cadet on Course 1 after he'd moved from Carlstrom Field to Riddle Field. When I arrived, there was Mr. Riddle showing a few friends around. He is never called Mr. Riddle, generally John Paul or JPR, or more often just Boss Riddle. He likes to be called just the boss and looks upon his gigantic organisation as one happy family. He is one of the most popular men with the staff as I have ever met, and most of us have had the pleasure of chatting with him. This is a poem written by a newly graduated number 5 BFTS pilot. He wrote this in 1942. Where'er the British flag is flown, with the stars and stripes above, you'll find a kindred unity of friendship and of love. Each British heart beneath those flags, whoever it may be, says, "Thank you to America for what you've been to me."
Welcome to the Eagle Heritage Project podcast. I'm your host, Bill Thompson, Executive Director, Engagement Initiatives and Heritage Project. I'm here at the podcast studio at Embry-riddle Aeronautical University on the flight line of the Daytona Beach, Florida campus. We just heard a poem read by Dr. Jenny Harding talking about British Flight Training School number 5 and the cadets. This is episode 2 as we talk about the cadets' lives. Episode 1, we talked about the BFTS. We talked about John Paul Riddle. Right now, I'd like to reintroduce Dr. Jenny Harding from the United Kingdom. Welcome back.
Thank you, Bill.
And thank you so much for reading what the cadets talked about on John Paul Riddle and their experience in America. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more? In the previous episode, we talked about your dad. So tell us some more about your dad and his experiences.
Okay, thank you, I will. Yeah, so my father was George Hogarth, and he came to Riddle Field in Clewiston in October 1941, and he stayed here until March 1942. He was on course 3 of what turned out to be 26 courses. Now, course 3 was unusual in several ways. First, they were the first course to spend all their time here at Riddle Field in Clewiston. And the second reason was that they'd all come from British universities, 3 in particular, the Edinburgh University, Oxford University and Cambridge University. And that's because they were all members of the air squadrons at those particular 3 universities. So they actually knew each other before they came here. My father was one of 13 of a contingent of 13 from Edinburgh University. So he knew all his Edinburgh friends very well indeed. So they tended to stick in one group in socialising. The Cambridge University people stuck together and the Oxford University people tended to stick together because they were all friends, they knew each other. They tended to share huts. So my father shared a hut with 8 other people. They were in two ranks of bunks. And he got to know them very well. There were 3 particular friends of his. And my father and his 3 friends, the first weekend they were in Clewiston, a cavalcade from Fort Myers turned up and asked if any of the cadets would like to go to Fort Myers for the weekend. So my father and his friends said yes, they would. And they were really lucky and they were allocated to a Mr. and Mrs. Simpson. And after that, nearly every weekend, Mr. and Mrs. Simpson, Ed and Ruth, would come over to Clewiston, pick up the 4 boys and take them back to their home in Fort Myers and entertain them for the Saturday evening and the Sunday. And then they would bring them back to Clewiston. And that was not unusual. That happened to a lot of them. And those friendships stayed forever.
They still, friendships that you still have.
I still have. So the grandchildren of Mr. and Mrs. Simpson, Ed and Ruth, I'm in contact with their grandson. And we speak. I've been to his house. They've been to the United Kingdom. We have met, which is wonderful.
And as we talk about this, and for those, if this is your first episode joining us, even though you need to listen to the first side of this concerning British Flight Training School number 5, but we're talking about going from Fort Myers to Clewiston, Florida in 1941.
Yeah.
So this was not a freeway or a tollway.
No,
this
not
was,
at all.
How was that journey? Do you know?
Well, I think long compared to UK things. Is it about 60 miles?
Yes.
65 miles, something like that.
On a dirt road.
On a dirt road. So if you were at home to go 65 miles in a car, that would be very unusual. That would be a long journey. And yet Ed and Ruth made this journey nearly every weekend with the boys. It was a dirt road. I've actually been on a road not to Fort Myers, but the back, what is now a back road between Clewiston in the general direction of Palm Beach and Miami, and that is a pretty poor road. It has been tarmacked, but it's a pretty poor road. And if it was like that, wow.
Very.
And yet they came and they entertained wonderfully.
And they were taken care of. And again, from episode 1, we talked about how we have these British soldiers who come on board. And again, America was not involved in the war.
At this time.
Not at this time. Come over on a ship and then go through Canada, then take a train, wear green suits. And if you ever look at the photos.
Can I just stop you?
Gray suits. I said green, but.
You actually said soldiers, not airmen.
Oh, thank you for the correction. Yes. But
it was gray suits.
Yeah, gray suits. I apologize for that. Great correction. And as we look at it, so they come down here, they've been on rations. Now they come into this welcoming with both Canada and America, welcoming our British airmen. And then now they have oranges and they have bananas and they have food and they have milk and cream and cheese, sugar. Things that they didn't have.
Jam or jelly, you would call it.
Jelly, yes. So very, very good. And so now it's a whole new experience. But they all knew what they were going into as well. But before we go into that, you're wearing a poppy. And I've seen the cemetery as well. And poppies have a special meaning. And then you're also wearing something else. Could you explain both of those to the audience?
Yeah, sure. The poppy is a Commonwealth symbol. And it was first used in the First World War. So after the battles in France, anybody that's been to France at the right time will know that when it rains, it can get very muddy. When you've got a battle on muddy fields, it gets really muddy, churns up the soil. After the war was over, the soil was left there, and poppies love growing on soil that's been churned up, like that muddy soil that's been churned up. And the poppies started to grow. So it was taken as a symbol to remember for British and Commonwealth people. And that's why I wear a poppy.
Very good.
And at our Remembrance Sunday, for about 2 weeks before and a couple of days afterwards, people wear poppies to remember. So I wear my poppy.
And when is Remembrance Sunday?
It is the Sunday that is nearest the 11th of November.
Okay.
So the Armistice Day.
Yep. And then you also are wearing another.
Yes, the other little badge, which is RAF Wings. It's called a Sweetheart Badge. So this isn't unique to the RAF, but service people would buy their sweethearts little badges with naval symbols. Perhaps it had their ship. Perhaps it was just a Royal Naval thing. Soldiers would buy little badges, perhaps with their regiment badge on it, and they would give it to their wives, their girlfriends, their sweethearts, just to remember them while they were away. And that's what it's called. It's a Sweetheart Badge, and it is my mother's, or it was my mother's, and I inherited it.
Thank you for sharing it. So now we go into the cadet's life, and training was challenging.
Yes.
And as much as there were times of revelry, times of fun, times of structure, and immense training, can you explain some of what they went through and do some of the stories that maybe some of the cadets would talk about?
Okay, so the training was in 3 parts: primary training, basic training, and advanced training. And you had to pass each part before you moved on to the next. They had to work really hard. It was flying training, it was navigation training, it was ground school training. And they also had a link trainer, not immediately, but they did eventually have a link trainer, so they could do some flying practice in a simulator, not actually up in the air. But it was very hard work, and the instructors were all American, started off as American civilians, and then they were given a rank in the American Air Force. they weren't that much older than the cadets, but they were all very experienced pilots. They were trained too to become instructors, and they were friendly, but they were firm. I think that's probably the best way of putting it, because when the pilots started, the instructors were up in the plane with them.
Yes.
So they had to make sure they got down safely. They had to work really hard.
So here we are. We're at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And as we walked over into the podcast studio, we saw Cessna 172s. And as we look at our Diamond aircraft, our multi-engine, what were they flying?
So for the primary training, they were flying Stearman P-17s, a biplane. For the basic training, at the beginning of the courses, they were flying a Vultee B-17, I think, B-13 Vultee. And for the advanced training, they flew a Harvard 86, what Americans tend to call a Texan, but the RAF call a Harvard.
Yes. And what was some of the stories that cadets would share out of these aircraft? Do you have any stories?
I think one of the stories that it's worth mentioning is about the Vultee, because a very tragic accident changed the training program and removed the Vultee from the scheme. So if I could explain, Bill, the Vultee wings tended to drop, so that's horizontal, but when you came to land, they did that.
Yes.
And unfortunately, and this was one of my father's colleagues, he was coming in to land after night exercise. A Florida fog came up, very quick, very dense, and Roger appeared to have mistook the fog for the ground. As he came in to land on what he thought was the ground, but was actually the fog, the plane tipped. And when he did go through the fog, it caught.
Flips his wing.
Yes. And the plane went on fire. And sadly, Roger died, and he is now buried at Oak Ridge that we talked about in the first episode. But that changed the program, because it wasn't the only accident like that. It was the only accident at Clewiston, but it wasn't the only accident in America. And the Vultee was withdrawn from the program. So the Harvard 86 was the one that was used for both basic and advanced training. A much easier plane to fly, I understand, and a much safer plane to fly.
So Jenny, how many weeks of training did these cadets go through after they got here? How did that go?
Okay, so their primary training lasted about 12 weeks or thereabouts. The whole thing lasted about 24 weeks, something like that. So the second part was equally split between basic and advanced training. But at each time, they had to pass exams. And if they failed to pass the exams, or they failed to pass their flying tests, they would be what's called washed out or eliminated. That didn't mean they went back to the UK. They would usually go back to somewhere in Canada, and they would be taught to be navigators, bomb aimers, engineers, all the other aircrew jobs that were available.
As we look at this, you have some 26 weeks, then they go home.
Yes.
That's a tough transition.
That's a very tough transition, but they were still training. So they were pilots, they'd got their wings, but they weren't ready for combat.
Okay.
So they had to go through more training to be ready for combat. And I guess that was probably about another 6 to 9 months worth of training.
Wow.
Yeah, I think my father did about 9 months, because he came back in March 1942 and he became operational in December 1942.
Well, we had the stories of some of them in the theater and what they were able to do fighting in the theater for their country.
Yes.
Can you share any of those stories?
So my father was a night fighter.
Okay.
This meant, as the name suggests, he flew mostly at night, but he also did do day patrols as well. And his job was he had a number of jobs that he had to do. He had to patrol various coastlines. He tended to fly to France and eventually Germany quite a lot. escorting bombers sometimes. Other jobs that he did would be go over and shoot something that would be very disruptive to the enemy. So they tended to shoot trains, engines quite often, which meant that the railway line would be damaged, the engine would be damaged, and it would just hold up supplies in Germany.
Yes. I mean, it's none of the things we really want to talk about
No,
in our history, but this is our history.
it's history and it happened.
Yes.
And the Germans came over to Britain and they did broadly similar things to us. So what happened in one country happens in another country. It's sadly, it's war.
Yes.
It's
it is
what
war.
happened.
Can you share some more stories about any of the cadets and something that we would want to hear?
Gosh, there are so many. So where do I start? I'm thinking, yes, I think one thing that covered all of them was the seriousness of it all. So it didn't matter whether they went back to the UK. And I would just like to say that the cadets who came to 5BFTS and went back as pilots, they were the cream of the cream. They were good pilots. Number 5 had a better record of training pilots than the other BFTSs.
I read that, yes.
And I think a lot of that is down to John Paul Riddle, as we've explained before, and the quality and the quality of the training that they had. But they went back to the UK. My father became a night fighter. Others went into Bomber Command. Others became instructors because they were jolly good pilots. And you need a good pilot to instruct other people. But it didn't matter what they did. It was serious. It wasn't fun. They weren't there to have fun. It wasn't joy riding. It was deadly serious stuff.
Absolutely. And they were doing it for their home.
They were doing it for the homeland.
And they were writing letters home.
And they were writing a lot of letters home. So a lot of those letters have been preserved, which is great. And whether it would happen now, a quick email isn't quite the same. They would write very long letters. They had to pass the censor, so there was a lot of things they couldn't say. But the general gist of things, yes, it's in the letters. And some of them, there are beautiful paragraphs in them about what they did, whether it was training, whether it was social and fun.
Social fun, friendships, training,
Absolutely.
challenges.
Absolutely.
And missing home, missing their loved ones, missing their sweethearts.
Missing their loved ones, absolutely.
And there was letters both directions, actually.
Yes.
And those that collection, some of them are still in the Clewiston Museum.
There's a lot in the Clewiston Museum. Some of us, like myself, I've got my father's letters. Other people I know have got their father's letters. And they are there and they can be read.
And they're scanned. And our goal is to have these on the Embry-riddle common, it's a common
Absolutely.
site. So it's
that
scholarly
anybody can read and see what it was really like.
And go from there and preserve that history.
Absolutely.
So as we start to close on this, is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience about the BFTS, the history, the cadets, your dad, and why this is important to keep moving forward and keeping this information out there, this history?
I think it's important. We don't want to lose it. I think probably World War II, there are more records about World War II than there were about World War I. Even World War I we don't want to lose, but World War II we have the opportunity to find out what it was like, because it is so different from how it is today. And you only have to look at the size of a Stearman biplane and even the Cessnas that are out there on the flight path. I mean, they're so different. An airliner today, a small plane then, but it worked. And we should never forget the sacrifice, because they did lose 5 years of their life if they started at the beginning and they went through to the end.
Yes.
Actually 6 years of their life. When their life had to change and everybody's lives had to change.
And again, I'm going to bring back Acadia, Oak Ridge Cemetery.
Okay.
Not every cadet made it out. There's 23.
23 there that didn't make it.
Buried there, British Commonwealth soil. And so, and ceremonies every year to continue to honor. And John Paul Riddle's ashes are there. And he has a gravesite there. And because those are those that died on this soil, but so many fighting for their homeland, this was the next step. And they knew it. And they were brave and they were fearless. And that is something we never want to lose.
I think that's true. And people did die. So my father, I mentioned the 4 friends that went out to Fort Myers nearly every weekend. Of those 4, 2 did die during the war. Not here in America. One was lost in France and is buried in France. The other one was lost somewhere over the English Channel, I think. And he has no known grave. His name is engraved on the Runnymede Memorial, which is near London. But that's 2 people. But it happened.
Yes.
And you got on with it. You couldn't stop. You had to keep going to carry on the work that they had started.
Your dad sounds like an incredibly special man.
Well, I thought he was. I thought he was, yes. And he did also inspire, nothing to do with Clewiston, but he did inspire my cousin, who did join the RAF, to join the RAF. Because my cousin is a little bit older than me, and my father used to talk to him about flying and tell him stories. And Chris, my cousin, then joined the RAF. And he always says, as a direct result of what my father said.
Very good. And we have that same concept that happens here in this country from World War II, from all the eras and all of our branches of the military. It's that legacy that the family creates.
Yes, indeed.
So Dr. Jenny Harding, thank you so much for joining us here at Embry-riddle in Daytona Beach, Florida. Thank you for being part of the Riddle Report. This is episode 2 of, to me, an incredibly interesting historical perspective of Embry-riddle, where we started, one of our starting points, especially in World War II, even though we talk about 1926. But when we look at the British airmen that we trained in 1941, 1942, through there, it's so important. And where we are today as we're about to celebrate 100 years of Embry-riddle Aeronautical University. Thank you for being our guest here today. We hope that you can come back again. And as you know, as I'm going to say, as friends, I certainly hope that we continue to see you and maybe others on Memorial Day weekend in Acadia, Florida, Oak Ridge Cemetery, to honor these brave airmen. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to know more information, please continue to go to the website and we'll help you find out what answers or questions you might have. Thank you so much.